Jason stumbled through the dense, alien forest, his boots crunching on the unfamiliar terrain. His ship had crashed not long ago, and he'd managed to survive the wreck, but now he was completely lost. The planet's jungle was thick, teeming with strange noises from creatures he couldn't see. The sun filtered through the tall, towering trees, casting long shadows on the ground. The air smelled like earth and something faintly metallic, a constant reminder that he wasn't on Earth anymore. He wiped sweat from his brow and checked his wrist communicator again. No signal. He had been trying to contact his crew for hours, but the crash had scrambled everything. No one was coming for him. He'd have to survive on his own, at least for the time being. Great, Jason muttered to himself, kicking a rock in frustration. This is exactly how I thought I'd end up, alone on some god-forsaken planet. As he walked further into the forest, he noticed the ground became softer, almost like a sponge beneath his feet. The trees were wider here, their trunks twisted into strange shapes, as if the planet itself had grown them with some purpose in mind. He kept his eyes peeled for anything useful, but so far, it was just more strange plants and unfamiliar wildlife. Suddenly, a rustling noise came from the bushes ahead. Jason froze, instinctively reaching for the blaster on his belt. His heart raced. He didn't know if it was some kind of animal or another human, but he wasn't taking any chances. He slowly pulled the blaster free, holding it steady in front of him. The rustling grew louder and Jason took a cautious step forward. His eyes scanned the underbrush, but nothing appeared. Then, from out of nowhere, a figure darted into his line of sight. Jason barely had time to react before the figure lunged at him, knocking him to the ground. The blaster flew from his hand as he hit the soft ground hard. He struggled to get up, but the weight of the stranger kept him pinned. Jason could feel the stranger's breath on his neck, the grip of strong hands pressing down on his chest. He swung his arms, trying to free himself, but the other person was too fast, too strong. Panic set in as the realization hit him. Whoever this was, they weren't playing around. "Stay down," a voice hissed from above him, sharp and commanding. Jason finally managed to throw his attacker off, rolling to the side to scramble for the blaster. But before he could grab it, the stranger was already on him again, pinning his arms to the ground. The weight was crushing and Jason couldn't get free. He struggled, his mind racing to figure out what to do. He tried to kick the figure off, but it was no use. Whoever this was, they were powerful. "Who are you?" Jason gasped, trying to get air back into his lungs. "What do you want?" The person didn't answer at first. Instead, they leaned closer, their face only inches from his. Jason could feel their breath, warm and steady. His heart was pounding in his chest, but the strangest thing was happening. He felt a strange pull, an attraction he couldn't explain. The person above him was different. They didn't look human. As Jason's vision cleared, he saw a pair of eyes staring down at him. Eyes that weren't just beautiful, but alien, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. The face that stared back at him was sharp, angular, with skin that shimmered faintly, as if it had its own light source. The person, no, the woman, was tall, with silver hair that flowed down her back, her figure lithe and strong. She was wearing armor, but her posture suggested confidence, even dominance. Jason's mouth went dry. "What the hell are you?" he whispered, still too stunned to react properly. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was more like a smirk, a playful, dangerous grin. "I'm someone you should be very careful with," she said in a voice that was oddly melodic but cold, like the sound of steel scraping against stone. "You have no idea where you are, human." Jason's mind was still processing the situation, and he couldn't help but stare. She had him pinned, but instead of feeling completely scared, there was something about her that captivated him. Her presence, her strength, the way she moved, all of it was different. She wasn't just another human. She was something more, something far more powerful. "I am just an explorer," Jason said, his voice shaky. "I crash-landed here. I didn't mean any harm." She tilted her head, inspecting him as if he were some kind of specimen. "Explorer," she mused, her eyes narrowing. "Well, you're far from home, that's for sure. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad for you." Before Jason could respond, the woman's eyes locked onto something behind him. She reached down quickly and, in a blur of motion, snatched the blaster off the ground. Jason froze, instinctively raising his hands, but she didn't aim the weapon at him. Instead, she inspected it, her fingers moving with an expert's precision. "You won't need this," she said, dropping it to the ground with a soft thud. "You're in my territory now." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, something strange happened. A sudden gust of wind blew through the forest, rustling the leaves in a powerful rush. The woman, unfazed by the storm's intensity, slowly stood up, pulling Jason with her. What are you doing?" Jason asked, confused. "You're not leaving here without me," she said flatly, her tone no longer playful. It was cold, firm. "Not unless you want to meet the real dangers of this place." Jason looked around, trying to find a way out. But as he glanced back at the woman, he realized she wasn't just trying to intimidate him. She meant it. If he didn't go with her, something worse could be lurking in the shadows. The woman didn't say anything more. She simply turned and began walking through the forest, her steps light and sure. Jason had no choice but to follow, his mind still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. "What's your name?" Jason called after her, though he wasn't sure why he bothered. He wasn't sure if she would even answer. "Zara," she said, her voice cutting through the thick air like a knife. "And if you're smart, you'll stick with me, human." As Jason trudged behind her, he couldn't help but feel a chill crawl down his spine. His heart was still racing, but there was a new, strange feeling creeping in. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. Who was this woman? And why did she seem so familiar, even though he'd never met her before? He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change forever. Jason stumbled through the dense forest behind Zara, his mind still racing from the events that had unfolded earlier. His heart was pounding in his chest, and every step felt heavier than the last. He couldn't get over how quickly everything had escalated. Just moments ago, he had been fighting for his life, pinned to the ground by a stranger. Now, he was walking through an alien jungle with her, following wherever she was leading. He glanced over at Zara, who was moving with grace and purpose, as though this was just another day for her. Her silver hair gleamed in the faint sunlight that broke through the canopy above them. Her expression was calm, but there was an intensity in her eyes that unsettled him. She was completely unfazed by the situation, as if it were all just another part of her routine. Jason tried to focus on their surroundings, but it was hard. The alien forest seemed to go on forever, a maze of twisted trees and strange, colorful plants. Every now and then he could hear the distant calls of creatures, but he couldn't see them. The sounds echoed through the trees, adding to the sense of unease that hung in the air. It felt like they were being watched, and Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, lurking just beyond his sight. Zara led him through the forest with ease, never pausing for a moment. She didn't seem to care about the dense underbrush or the uneven terrain. Every step she took seemed deliberate, calculated. Jason, on the other hand, was stumbling more than walking. He had no idea where they were going or why she had decided to keep him with her. But something told him that resisting was not an option, not with someone like her. After what felt like hours, Zara finally stopped in front of a large rock formation. It was strange, almost out of place. The rocks were smooth and jagged, and there were intricate carvings etched into their surface. Jason couldn't make out what the symbols meant, but they looked old, ancient, even. Zara turned to face him, her eyes locking onto his. "This is where we'll stay for now," she said, her voice low and steady. "We'll be safe here for a while." Jason didn't argue. He was too tired to. The trek through the jungle had left him drained, and he knew it wasn't over yet. There was something about Zara, something that made him feel both uneasy and strangely drawn to her. It wasn't just her strength or the way she had taken control of the situation. It was more than that. There was a presence about her, a quiet power that he couldn't ignore. She reached up and touched a hidden lever on the side of the rock formation, and to Jason's surprise, the stone door began to shift, revealing an entrance. He stared wide-eyed as the door slid open smoothly, like it was made of metal, not stone. Inside, there was a narrow hallway that led deeper into the rock. The walls were lined with glowing crystals that gave off a soft, eerie light, illuminating the path ahead. Zara motioned for Jason to follow her, and he hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside. The air inside the rock formation was cool and dry, a stark contrast to the humid jungle outside. As they walked deeper into the structure, Jason couldn't help but marvel at how advanced everything seemed. The walls weren't just stone. They were interwoven with some kind of metallic material that glimmered faintly in the dim light. They reached a small chamber at the end of the hallway. It was sparsely furnished, with a few cushions scattered on the floor and a low table in the center. Zara moved to the table and began to unpack a small bag that she had been carrying. Jason watched her, still trying to make sense of everything. Who was she? Why had she brought him here? And why did it feel like there was more to her than just a simple warrior? "Sit," Zara said, motioning to the cushions on the floor. Her voice was firm but not unkind. "You must be tired." Jason nodded and lowered himself onto one of the cushions. His legs were sore from the long walk, and his mind was still spinning. He watched as Zara moved with practiced ease, setting out small containers and bottles from her bag. She didn't look at him as she worked, but Jason couldn't help but stare. There was something about her that intrigued him, something beyond the way she had easily overpowered him earlier. She was different, strong, intelligent, and mysterious. After a few moments, Zara finally looked up at him, her gaze sharp and calculating. "You still haven't told me your name," she said, her voice steady. "You're not very talkative for a human." Jason swallowed, feeling a little self-conscious. He had been so focused on the chaos of the situation that he hadn't even thought to introduce himself. "Sorry," he said. "I'm Jason, Jason Carter," Zara nodded, as if she had been expecting this answer. "Jason," she repeated softly, as though testing the sound of it. "I'm Zara." Jason didn't know what to say next. He had so many questions, but none of them felt appropriate to ask just yet. Instead, he watched as she prepared something in one of the containers, a sort of paste. It didn't look like food, and he wasn't sure what it was. But Zara seemed to be preparing it with care, her movements precise and deliberate. "What is that?" Jason asked, finally breaking the silence. "It's for the wound," Zara replied without looking up. "You'll need it to heal." Jason's hand instinctively went to the side of his neck, where he could still feel the sting of the cut he had gotten when they first fought. He had almost forgotten about it in the chaos, but now that she mentioned it, he could feel the soreness. The cut wasn't deep, but it was still painful. Zara finished preparing the paste and walked over to him. She motioned for him to tilt his head, and when he did, she carefully applied the mixture to his wound. The paste was cool against his skin, and Jason winced slightly as she pressed it into the cut. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, considering how fierce she had been earlier. Jason couldn't help but notice the contrast between the two sides of her, the warrior who had pinned him to the ground without hesitation, and the caretaker who was tending to his wounds now. It was a side of her he hadn't expected. "There," Zara said after a moment, stepping back. "That should help. It'll stop the bleeding and speed up the healing." Jason touched the area where the paste had been applied, surprised at how much better it already felt. "Thanks," he said quietly. Zara didn't respond at first. She stood there for a moment, her arms crossed, studying him. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but firm. "You're lucky I decided to help you," she said. "Most humans wouldn't get a second chance." Jason looked up at her, confused. "Why did you help me then?" Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time there was a flicker of something softer in her gaze. "Because," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "I see potential in you. You're not like the others." Jason frowned, not sure what she meant. "What do you mean by that?" Zara's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You'll find out soon enough," she said. "But for now, you should rest. Tomorrow will be more difficult than today." Jason nodded, still unsure of what exactly he had gotten himself into. But he knew one thing for sure. His life had just become infinitely more complicated. Jason woke up to the sound of distant, strange birds chirping outside the rock formation. The air inside was still cool, and the faint glow from the crystals on the walls gave the room a surreal, almost otherworldly ambience. For a moment he wasn't sure where he was, but then the events from the day before flooded back into his mind. His crash, Zara, and everything that had happened since. He rubbed his eyes and sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings. The room he was in was small but functional, and while it wasn't exactly luxurious, it was far more comfortable than the jungle outside. The air felt clean here, and the silence was oddly peaceful, but Jason couldn't shake the unease he felt. What was Zara's plan? Why had she brought him here, and why had she been so insistent on keeping him alive? He glanced over to the corner where Zara had made her bed the night before. It was a simple arrangement, with just a few cushions on the floor. The woman had hardly slept, her movements quiet and methodical. When Jason had drifted off to sleep, he'd noticed that Zara stayed up for hours, keeping watch. He wasn't sure if she was afraid of something, or if she was just used to living in such an intense state of readiness. As he stretched and stood up, he tried to move quietly, but Zara was already awake. She sat by the table, her back to him, as she methodically cleaned and reloaded her weapons. The soft clinking sound of metal against metal broke the silence. "You're up early," Jason said, his voice rough from sleep. He wasn't sure how to talk to her yet. After everything that had happened, he felt a strange mixture of confusion and curiosity. They hadn't really spoken much after the wedding ceremony, if that's what you could even call it. Zara didn't look up from her work, but she spoke in her usual calm tone. "I'm always up early. You should get used to it. The jungle is dangerous at all hours, and I prefer to be prepared." Jason watched her for a moment before walking over to the table. He sat down across from her, unsure of how to proceed. He wanted to ask her more about the strange ceremony, about her species, and about what exactly she expected from him, but there was a tension in the air. He could feel it. She wasn't going to give him answers unless she wanted to. "So what now?" Jason finally asked, trying to break the silence. Zara paused, her fingers still on the weapon she was cleaning. She seemed to consider his question carefully before responding. "Now we move forward. You'll be training with me. There's no other way. If you want to survive, you'll need to learn how to defend yourself." Jason's eyebrows shot up. "Training? I didn't come here to fight." Zara met his gaze then, her sharp eyes unwavering. "No one comes here wanting to fight, but that's the reality. You're on an alien world. You're a human in a place where humans are rare. The creatures here aren't friendly, and you don't know the first thing about surviving in this jungle. So yes, you'll be training." Jason felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had never thought of himself as a fighter. He was just an explorer, someone who studied new planets and environments, not someone who survived in the wild. But he also knew that he didn't have much choice. If he was going to get out of this mess alive, he had to listen to Zara. She clearly knew this place far better than he did. "I'll teach you the basics," Zara continued, her voice soft but firm. "How to move without making noise, how to spot danger before it sees you, how to fight if it comes to that." Jason nodded slowly, trying to push past the fear creeping up his spine. "All right," he said, not sure if he sounded more confident than he felt. "Let's get started then." Zara stood up, and for the first time, Jason saw a faint hint of a smile cross her face. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She motioned for him to follow her, and they left the small chamber, stepping into the narrow hallway once again. The cool air outside was refreshing, and Jason felt a small sense of relief. At least the forest wasn't suffocatingly hot like it had been the day before. Zara led him outside, and they walked deeper into the jungle. Jason tried to keep up, but the terrain was difficult, and he stumbled over the uneven ground more than once. The forest seemed different now, more menacing. The trees were taller, the foliage thicker, and Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. They came to a clearing, a small patch of land that seemed oddly quiet. The air was still, and there was no sign of any animals, though Jason could feel a tinge of discomfort crawl up his neck. Zara stopped in the center of the clearing and turned to face him. "This is where you'll learn," she said simply, her voice serious. "We start with the basics." Jason felt a slight weight on his shoulders as he looked at Zara, wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into. He was a civilian, not a soldier, and he had no idea how to fight, but he could see that Zara wasn't giving him much of a choice. He had to learn or die, those were the rules here. "What do you want me to do?" Jason asked, trying to push away his unease. Zara's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. "Move like I move," she said. "Stay low, stay quiet, don't make a sound." Jason nodded, trying to steady his breath. He watched as Zara dropped to one knee, her movements fluid, almost like she was part of the forest itself. She glided over the ground, her every movement controlled and deliberate. Jason tried to mimic her, but his clumsy attempts felt awkward compared to Zara's precision. She didn't say anything for a while, watching him closely. When he made another mistake, tripping over a root and stumbling, Zara simply raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to last long if you keep making noise," she said, her tone flat. Jason's face burned with embarrassment. He had never felt more out of place in his life, but he didn't have the luxury of giving up. He knew that much. So he tried again, this time more carefully, focusing on every step. Slowly, over the next few hours, he started to improve. Not much, but enough to satisfy Zara. "This isn't enough," she said after a while, her voice hard. "You need to push yourself harder. You'll need to fight eventually, and if you can't move like this when the time comes, you'll be dead." Jason swallowed hard, trying to push aside the cold fear that settled in his stomach. He knew she was right, but that didn't make it easier. He wasn't a fighter, but here, on this strange world with Zara, he didn't have much of a choice. After hours of training, Zara finally called a halt. "You've made progress, but you're not ready yet." Jason collapsed onto the ground, exhausted and sore, but strangely proud of what he'd accomplished. He didn't know if it was enough, but it was something. As he lay there, breathing heavily, Zara sat down across from him, her expression unreadable. "You'll have to do better. There's more to learn." Jason didn't respond. He was too tired to talk, but he knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning. He didn't know what was coming next, but he was certain that the days ahead would be just as hard, if not harder. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and effort. Jason could feel his body aching from the constant training, but he also felt something else, something that he wasn't entirely sure how to describe. It was a sense of purpose, or perhaps a realization that he was slowly becoming part of something bigger than himself. Zara had made it clear that survival wasn't just about physical strength. It was about understanding the jungle, the creatures that lurked within it, and the world around them. Every morning, Zara had him training again. His body had begun to adjust to the rhythm of the jungle, moving silently through the underbrush, spotting potential dangers before they could spot him. The long, tedious hours had paid off little by little. Jason had learned to move with the land, but there was always a sense that he wasn't quite there yet. Each day, Zara pushed him harder, demanding more of him than he had ever thought possible. She wasn't kind, but she wasn't cruel either. Zara was efficient, and that was all that mattered. Her instructions were clear, her movements precise. She never showed any emotion beyond what was necessary, but Jason noticed the occasional glimmer of something softer, buried deep beneath the surface. When he made progress, she would nod in approval, and for a moment Jason would feel a small sense of pride. But those moments were fleeting. On the fifth day, as the sun began to set, casting an orange hue across the dense jungle, Zara turned to Jason. Her eyes were more serious than ever, and the usual coolness in her gaze was gone. Instead, there was something like determination there, something that made Jason uneasy. "It's time," she said, her voice steady. "You're ready for the next step." Jason's heart rate quickened. "What next?" he asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. "We leave today," Zara replied, her gaze shifting toward the horizon. "There's a village not far from here. I've been avoiding it, but we need supplies. You're going with me." Jason blinked in surprise. "A village? Are there other humans there?" Zara shook her head. "No, there are no other humans, but the village is an important place. We need to go." Jason couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. The idea of encountering other people, even if they weren't human, felt like a step into the unknown. He had been so focused on survival and training that he hadn't thought much about the rest of the world, about the people who lived on this planet. It made him wonder, what kind of place was it? What kind of people lived there? "What kind of place is it?" Jason asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Zara's expression darkened. "It's a place of power," she said, her tone guarded. "And that's all you need to know for now." Jason wanted to press further, but something in Zara's tone made him hesitate. He could tell that there was something about the village that she wasn't telling him, but he didn't have the luxury of questioning her. He had learned that much by now. The world they were living in wasn't the kind of place where you asked too many questions. They began their journey as the sky turned dark, the jungle now bathed in the dim light of the moons above. Jason followed Zara as she navigated through the trees with ease, her movements fluid and silent. The jungle seemed even more dangerous at night, the sounds of creatures echoing through the air. Every rustle of leaves, every movement in the shadows made Jason's heart race. He had learned to stay calm, to control his fear, but it was hard not to feel like prey. As they moved deeper into the jungle, Jason began to notice that the landscape was changing. The dense trees were thinning out, and the ground beneath their feet was becoming firmer. The air felt cooler, and there was a strange sense of anticipation in the air, as if something was waiting for them just ahead. They finally came to a clearing, and Jason could see the faint outline of a large structure in the distance. It was ancient, covered in vines, but its size and shape made it clear that it had once been something significant. The stone walls were carved with symbols that Jason couldn't understand, and the architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen. "This is the village?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zara nodded, her eyes scanning the area. "Yes, but be careful, the people here don't trust outsiders." Jason's stomach tightened. "What are we supposed to do? Just walk in?" Zara looked at him, her gaze piercing. "You follow my lead. I've been here before and I know how to deal with them. But you need to stay calm. Don't do anything that will attract attention." Jason nodded, trying to steady his breath. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that he had to be careful. The last thing he wanted was to make an enemy of the people here. As they approached the structure, Jason could see figures moving in the shadows, but no one came forward. The village was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. It was unsettling. Jason could feel his nerves on edge, but he stayed close to Zara, trusting that she knew what she was doing. Zara led him through the village, passing between crumbling buildings and broken stone walls. There were no signs of life, at least not at first glance. But as they moved deeper into the village, Jason began to notice the eyes watching them, hidden behind windows, peering from doorways. The people here were watching, but they were not approaching. Finally, they arrived at what appeared to be the center of the village. It was a large, open area surrounded by stone pillars. The ground was covered in symbols, etched into the earth itself. It felt like a sacred place, but Jason couldn't understand why. His heart was pounding, and he could feel the weight of the eyes on him. Zara stopped in the center of the area and turned to Jason. "Stay here," she said, her voice low. "I need to speak to them." Jason watched as she walked toward a group of figures standing in the shadows. They were tall, their features hidden beneath hoods, but their presence was intimidating. Zara spoke to them in a language that Jason didn't understand, her voice calm but firm. The figures listened intently, and for a moment, Jason wondered what they were saying. Then one of the figures stepped forward and addressed Zara. His voice was low, but Jason could hear the anger in his tone. "You bring a human here?" the figure asked, his words sharp. "What do you expect from us?" Zara's response was calm, measured. "I need your help," she said. "And this human is my responsibility." Jason couldn't hear the rest of the conversation, but the tension in the air was palpable. He could see Zara's body language. She wasn't backing down, but the situation was tense. He knew that whatever was happening here, it was important. This village wasn't just a place of refuge. It was something much more. As the conversation continued, Jason couldn't help but feel like an outsider, like a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. He wanted to speak up to ask what was going on, but he knew better than to interrupt. Finally, Zara turned back to him, her face unreadable. "We're leaving," she said simply. Jason's heart skipped a beat. What happened? What did they say? Zara's expression softened, but only slightly. "It doesn't matter. We'll get what we need, but it's not safe to stay here any longer." Without another word, she turned and led him back through the village, moving quickly now. Jason could feel the weight of the eyes on him again, and he realized that Zara's words had meant something more. Whatever was happening in the village, it was clear that they had to leave before things escalated further. As they left the village behind and returned to the safety of the jungle, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that they had narrowly escaped something dangerous. Zara hadn't said much, but he could tell that whatever had transpired in the village was far from over. The tension in the air was thick, and Jason knew that their journey was far from finished. For the first time since he had crashed on this strange planet, Jason had a sinking feeling that he was caught in something much bigger than himself. And whatever it wasn't going to let him go without a fight.